By the time Saturday rolled around, I had my plan down to science. Not revenge for its own sake, correction, precision, poetic justice. If Karen wanted to make my private lake part of her drainage system, I'd extend the favor by helping her backyard understand what a real overflow felt like. The trick was subtlety. I couldn't risk breaking any actual laws or HOA rules, not with her habit of weaponizing them. My setup would be entirely natural, water flowing where it wanted to, just with a little nudge in direction. So, I spent the morning pretending to mow my lawn while quietly adjusting the storm runoff valves and my pump extension. The hose that had once carried her pool water down to my property now sat coiled behind my shed, cleaned and ready for a return trip. By the time the sun dipped, my backyard lights reflected on the smooth, glassy surface of the lake, still, silent, holding its breath with me. Karen's Saturday nights were predictable. Around 7, the same crowd of HOA regulars arrived, wine glasses clinking, laughter echoing, her patio glowing under fairy lights. They'd lounge near her pool, gossiping about rule breakers, while pretending to be sophisticated. I stayed inside, lights off, watching from the window like an amused ghost. My pump was silent, efficient, calibrated to start its slow siphon after midnight when the world turned still. The lake would release its top layer, just a few thousand gallons, enough to cover her lower yard, through the very same pipe she'd left connected. I'd adjusted the slope slightly so gravity would finish the job for me. No vandalism, no evidence, just water following the path she built. At 12:17 a.m., I stepped outside to check the progress. The moon hung low and full, silver on the lake's surface. The faint hum of the pump blended with the chorus of crickets. I knelt near the drainage and felt a quiet rush of satisfaction as water moved uphill, nature itself returning the favor. The hose quivered slightly under pressure, ripples tracing their way toward Karen's side. I followed the line of the ditch with my flashlight, watching the first traces of dark water slide beneath her retaining wall. It was perfect. I didn't stay long. I didn't need to. By morning, her precious garden would tell the story. When I woke up at dawn, the neighborhood was already stirring, not with birdsong, but with shouting. Karen's voice cut through the air like a siren again. I didn't rush outside this time. I took my time, made coffee, even buttered toast. Then I stepped onto the porch, calm as ever. Her backyard was a swamp. The once pristine lounge area looked like a disaster zone. The water had crept up halfway to her pool deck, drowning the flower beds and turning her imported lawn into a squelching bog. She was knee-deep in it, waving her phone around, yelling at someone on speaker. "It's flooding again. My whole backyard. Dale, you need to send someone now." She turned, catching me watching. "You," she shrieked. "This is your doing." I raised my cup in a lazy salute. "Morning, Karen. You might want to move those cushions before they float away." She stomped to the fence, splashing mud all over her robe. "I've had it with you. I'm filing a lawsuit for damages," she screeched. "My property value is tanking because of your vendetta." I pretended to think about it. "Actually," I said mildly, "I think it's tanking because of all that water you dumped last week. Must have weakened the soil structure." Her face twisted. "Don't you dare turn this on me. You're obsessed. You're stalking me." "No," I said with a shrug, "I'm just maintaining my ecosystem." She screamed something incoherent and stormed back toward her house, probably to call her lawyer, or her gossip chain. Either way, I knew she wouldn't let this drop quietly. By mid-afternoon, a county inspector returned, the same one who'd visited days earlier. I watched from my dock as he trudged through her backyard again, camera in hand. This time, Karen wasn't smiling. She was pacing like a caged animal while he took photos. I couldn't hear the full exchange, but I caught bits and pieces, words like soil contamination, drainage violation, and remediation order. My phone buzzed an hour later. Unknown number. I answered anyway. "This is Karen's attorney," a clipped voice said. "My client alleges you intentionally redirected water onto her property." I laughed quietly. Your client's pipe redirected it first, I said. I just let gravity work both ways. There was silence, then an annoyed sigh. Expect formal communication soon. Tell Karen I'll keep the water running till it arrives, I said before hanging up. That evening, Priya stopped by, one of the few neighbors who wasn't afraid to talk to me anymore. She brought over cookies and a look that said she wanted the full story. Did you really flood her yard? She asked, half whispering, half grinning. I didn't flood anything, I said. I just fixed her drainage problem. She laughed. Well, you've become a legend. Half the block's rooting for you, the other half's terrified. That's balance, I said with a smirk. But it's not over. She's too prideful to back down. Priya shook her head. She's already embarrassing herself. Dale told me the HOA's distancing from her. Apparently, the county fine could hit 5 figures. That number made me pause. Even for Karen, that would sting. But sure enough, the next morning she escalated again. I came outside to find a tall, notice of infraction, sign staked right at the edge of my driveway, hand-printed in bold red paint. Illegal water system. HOA will remove. The letters were uneven, shaky, definitely not official. At the bottom, she'd scrawled, signed, HOA enforcement in her unmistakable cursive. It would have been funny if it weren't so desperate. I took a photo, chuckled, and sent it to Dale with a short text. Did you approve this art installation? His reply came back within minutes. Absolutely not. Please remove it. That afternoon, I left the sign on her porch with a note taped on it. Returned to sender. Wrong address. By now, the situation had turned into suburban theater. People slowed their cars to see her flooded yard and my calm demeanor. Rumors spread. Some said I'd installed underground sprinklers aimed at her fence, others claimed I'd hired a landscaping company to build a moat. None of it was true, but the mystery worked in my favor. Karen couldn't prove anything, and every attempt she made to retaliate backfired spectacularly. When she tried to file another complaint, the HOA board quietly dismissed it, citing her ongoing violation investigation. Even her allies began to drift away, unwilling to sync with her. It started with the smell, chlorine, sharp and wrong, cutting through the clean scent of pine and lake water that usually drifted through my back porch at dawn. I remember standing there, coffee mug in hand, watching the lake ripple in a way it never had before. The surface shimmered oddly, bubbles popping near the dock like someone had dumped detergent into it. At first, I thought maybe a septic tank leaked upstream, but then I saw the trail. A narrow concrete drainage pipe from my uphill neighbor's property, Karen's house, gushing out a foamy, blue-tinted torrent straight into my lake. I watched in disbelief as the stream churned its way down, carrying every last drop of her pool water into the water I'd fished, swum, and kayaked in for 10 years. The sight was surreal, like watching someone pour bleach into your coffee while smiling. I stormed up the slope barefoot, coffee forgotten on the railing, half ready to reason and half ready to roar. Karen was exactly where I expected her to be, standing in her bathrobe, arms folded, wearing that smug morning calm of someone who believes the world itself works on their permission. Her pool was half drained, and a garden hose snaked down to the outlet that led to my property. Karen, I started, voice calm but cracking at the edges, tell me you're not emptying your pool into my lake. She blinked, as if I were the one being dramatic, then smiled with a serenity that made my teeth grind. It's just water, she said lightly, adjusting her sunglasses. It'll mix in. It's not a big deal. I stared at her like she'd just claimed fire was cold. That's chlorinated water, I said, gesturing toward the pipe. There's fish, plants. This is a living ecosystem. Karen rolled her eyes and turned back toward her patio. Please. You act like you own nature. It's community water anyway. That was the moment I realized it wasn't ignorance, it was entitlement. She truly believed the lake belonged to the HOA, not the individual property owners who bordered it. Which was funny, because I'd bought this parcel long before the HOA even existed. The lake wasn't public. It was technically my private pond, fed by an underground spring, registered under my name. I'd even posted the required signage years ago, small, subtle, nothing flashy. But of course, subtlety doesn't survive in Karen's world. She operated on volume and audacity. That morning, as I walked back to my porch, the chlorine smell thickened, and the once clear water had turned a pale, milky turquoise. My dog, Scout, sniffed it and sneezed twice. I felt my stomach drop. By noon, my phone was buzzing with calls from 2 other neighbors. Apparently, their kids had been playing near the water and came back with rashes. I drove straight to the HOA office, thinking surely someone there would take this seriously. But the manager, Dale, leaned back in his chair with a look that screamed, "Don't make me deal with this. If it's runoff, it's natural," he said lazily. "Everyone's drainage connects somewhere." I pulled out photos on my phone. Karen's hose, the pipe, the foamy discharge. "That's not runoff, that's chemical waste," I said. He waved a hand. "Look, she probably just needed to clean her pool. You can't expect everyone to test their water for fish safety." That's when the sarcastic part of me woke up fully. "So if I dump motor oil on my lawn, that's fine too?" I asked. Dale shrugged. "If it's on your property." I left before I said something I'd regret. But the seed had been planted, not just in my mind, but in theirs. Karen's influence on the HOA was strong. She'd chaired 3 committees and won Community Volunteer of the Year twice, largely because she threw wine nights and got people to sign petitions they never read. I knew direct confrontation wouldn't work. So instead, I decided to play the long game. That evening, I took samples from the lake, labeled them carefully, and drove them to a private environmental lab in town. The technician, a college kid named Rami, asked what I suspected. "Chlorine, algacides, maybe stabilizers," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "Those are pool chemicals." "Exactly." When he told me results would take 2 days, I nodded. "Perfect. I can wait." What I couldn't wait for was the growing anger that pulsed every time I walked past that murky shoreline. The fish had vanished deeper into the water, the frogs were silent, and even the reeds looked wilted. It wasn't just my lake. It was my sanctuary, and she'd poisoned it out of convenience. The next morning, Karen was out again, sipping her smoothie, waving at the garbage truck like she was queen of the cul-de-sac. When she saw me, she smiled and called out, "Hope the smell's gone down," as if she'd done me a favor. I smiled back, but something inside me clicked. That wasn't remorse. That was mockery. She thought she'd won. She thought I'd just roll over like everyone else did. So I started planning. I studied the drainage layout, hers, mine, and the shared storm channel. I realized something fascinating. The gradient from her house to mine was only slightly higher than the opposite side, which meant with the right redirection, gravity could be a beautiful accomplice. That night, under the cover of crickets and fog, I walked the line between our yards with a flashlight. The pipe she'd used ran under a decorative retaining wall she'd built against HOA code. Technically my land extended 2 feet beyond it. I crouched there, marking angles, tracing how the pipe could easily be rerouted. If she wanted to share water, I'd share back. I'd send her gift home where it belonged. Still, I didn't want to act without proof. 2 days later, the lab called. "You were right," Rami said. "Chlorine levels are 6 times higher than legal limits for discharge. There's also cyanuric acid and copper sulfate, heavy doses. Whoever dumped this, they didn't care about contamination." I thanked him, asked for a printed report, and smiled the whole drive home. It wasn't just petty satisfaction, it was the certainty of ammunition. That evening, I walked past Karen's house again. Her pool sparkled, freshly refilled, as if nothing had happened. She waved at me, oblivious. "Beautiful evening, huh?" she called. "You should try a pool instead of a pond, less algae." I laughed softly. "Don't worry," I said. "I've been learning a lot about water flow lately." She tilted her head, probably thinking I was complimenting her. That night, as the crickets chirped and moonlight silvered the lake, I connected a long, flexible discharge hose from my backup pump, the one I used to manage overflow during rainy seasons. It reached neatly to the drainage channel, the same one that led uphill toward Karen's decorative rock bed. I tested the flow quietly. The water pressure worked perfectly. My plan was simple. When she slept, the pump would do what she had done, but in reverse. I'd drain the contaminated layer, flush it back through the same path it came, and let her manicured backyard enjoy the gift she'd shared with me. As I watched the first faint trickle of lake water slither uphill, the absurdity almost made me laugh. This wasn't revenge. It was balance, Newton's law applied to suburban justice. Karen had turned my peaceful lake into a chemical stew. By sunrise, she'd wake to find that karma, like water, always flows back. That should have been the end, but Karen wasn't wired for surrender. Instead, she doubled down, whispering to neighbors that I'd manipulated the system to humiliate her. A few believed her, but most just shrugged. The irony was that her lawn began to die where the contaminated water had pooled. The grass turned patchy and the shrubs wilted. Nature had its own way of filing reports. Still, she wasn't done yet. A week later, I came home to find a bright blue HOA citation taped to my door. Non-compliant water management equipment, subject to removal. That's when I knew she'd gone fully rogue. The board didn't issue citations directly. She'd made this one herself. That night, under the same soft moonlight where it all began, I walked down to the lake again. The air smelled clean, almost sweet. I thought about ending it there, letting karma finish her off slowly. But then I saw her pool lights shimmer through the trees, neon blue against the dark sky, and I realized Karen only understood lessons when they were loud. If she thought she could weaponize water, then I'd teach her what a real current looked like. She dumped her mess into my lake once. I'd send it back again, but this time I'd make sure she couldn't pretend it was an accident. By sunrise, the sound of my pump was barely audible under the morning breeze, but what it accomplished overnight was impossible to ignore. From my porch, I could see streaks of pale blue snaking through the drainage ditch, glistening like liquid glass. It had flowed steadily all night, guided by gravity and a subtle angle adjustment I'd made with a few strategically placed rocks and garden edging. Karen's backyard sat higher than mine, but not by much, and water, when persuaded correctly, becomes a very obedient accomplice. I didn't expect to see her at that hour, but Karen was already outside, shrieking in disbelief. From the looks of it, her carefully trimmed lawn had turned into a soggy marsh. The decorative stones around her pool deck were half submerged, and her pristine white lounge chairs floated like small boats. I sipped my coffee with the quiet satisfaction of someone who just witnessed the laws of nature serving justice without a word spoken. By the time she spotted me, I was pretending to prune the hydrangeas near the fence. Her robe was splattered with mud, her hair wild, and her voice carried like a siren. Did you do this?" she shouted, pointing toward the puddled mess that had once been her garden. I looked up calmly. "Good morning, Karen," I said, tone polite enough to make her angrier. "Rough morning." She stomped closer, the hem of her robe dripping, eyes blazing. "My entire backyard is flooded. This water came from your property." I blinked with practiced innocence. "Oh, that's strange," I said. "Gravity usually doesn't work uphill." She stared, trying to process whether I was mocking her or genuinely stupid. "Don't get smart with me," she hissed. "You've been messing around at night. I saw you with a flashlight." I shrugged. "Inspecting the drainage, actually. You know, the one you connected illegally." Her jaw tightened. "I did no such thing. My contractor handled that. If there's a problem, it's the HOA's fault." She said it with the conviction of someone who believed the HOA was her personal army. I smiled thinly. "You might want to check your bylaws. Dumping pool water into private property is a violation." That word, violation, made her twitch. The word held power in her world. She used it often against others. Now, it hung in the air like smoke. "You'll be hearing from the HOA," she said finally, spinning on her heel. I waved cheerfully. "Tell Dale I said hi." Within hours, my prediction came true. A black SUV rolled up to my driveway, and Dale stepped out with his clipboard, sweating through his polyester shirt. "Morning," he said, forcedly casual. "We've had a complaint." "Let me guess," I said, leaning on the fence. "Something about water running uphill?" His smile faltered. "Well, Karen claims your sump system redirected water into her yard." I gestured toward the ditch. "That's interesting. You mean the same drainage she used to dump her pool into my lake?" He glanced uneasily at his papers. "We don't have evidence of that." I reached into my back pocket and handed him the lab report sealed in an envelope. "Now you do," I said. His face paled slightly as he scanned the page. "Chlorine, copper sulfate, stabilizers," I recited. "All traced to one source. If the HOA wants to get involved, you'll be dealing with the Department of Environmental Protection, not just me." He looked up sharply. "That's unnecessary. No need to bring the state into it." "Then maybe tell Karen to keep her chemicals out of my ecosystem," I said evenly. "If she apologizes and fixes the drainage, we'll call it even." Dale nodded nervously, muttering something about mediation, and left without another word. Karen watched from her porch the entire time, a hand on her hip, the other clutching her phone like a weapon. She thought she'd won the last round. She didn't realize I'd just changed the rules of the game. That night, the lake shimmered again, this time cleaner. My pump had done its job, and I shut it off for good. Nature had been balanced, at least symbolically. But I underestimated Karen's ability to escalate. 2 days later, I woke to find a bright orange notice staked into my lawn. "Unauthorized water system, immediate HOA review required." My laugh echoed across the yard. I almost admired her persistence. She'd gone running to her bored allies, and now they were trying to flip the script. I walked down the street later that afternoon, where a small crowd of nosy neighbors had gathered near her driveway. Karen was holding court, gesturing dramatically toward my property. "He's been rerouting water. It's flooding my foundation. It's dangerous," she said. One of the newer residents, a soft-spoken woman named Priya, asked, "Didn't you drain your pool into his lake last week?" Karen froze for a second too long. "That's irrelevant," she snapped. "That water didn't hurt anyone." I stepped closer, hands in pockets. "Actually it did," I said, loud enough for the group to hear. "Fish died, kids got rashes, and the HOA manager has the lab result. But sure, let's talk about my evil pump." Karen spun toward me, her face reddening. "You're harassing me," she yelled. "You've been spying and sabotaging. I want you fined." Dale, who'd arrived just in time to witness her meltdown, looked exhausted. "Karen, please," he sighed. "This isn't helping." But she wasn't listening. "He's a menace," she continued, voice shrill. "He thinks he's above the rules. We can't have people taking revenge." The irony was delicious. I almost thanked her for the free advertisement. The HOA board scheduled an emergency meeting that evening. Half the neighborhood showed up, not because they cared, but because entertainment was scarce in our quiet cul-de-sac. Karen presented photos of her flooded yard, conveniently omitting the earlier drainage pipe. I waited until she was done performing before standing. "If we're trading evidence," I said calmly, "I have something to share." I set a small USB stick on the table and nodded toward the projector. The screen flickered to life with footage from my outdoor security cameras. Karen's hose draining directly into the lake, time-stamped and clear. The room went silent. Dale cleared his throat. "Well, that seems conclusive." Karen sputtered. Those are old recordings. "From last week," I said. "You can check the metadata." For a brief moment, the mighty HOA queen lost her footing. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for support, but most faces were avoiding hers. I could see the calculation in her expression, the fragile ego grappling with exposure. "Fine," she said finally, forcing a laugh. "It was just water. I didn't know it was a big deal." "You knew," I replied softly. "You just didn't care." Dale ended the meeting quickly after that, promising to review the matter internally. I knew that meant they'd try to sweep it under the rug, but I'd already anticipated that. The next morning, I sent a copy of the lab results and footage to the county environmental office. Not to spite Karen, but to make sure the record existed outside her sphere of influence. When the county inspector showed up unannounced 2 days later, clipboard in hand, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. From my kitchen window, I watched him walk through her yard, pointing at the drainage system, taking samples from the soil. Karen trailed behind, trying to charm him with coffee and small talk, but his expression never changed. The next day, a notice went up on her fence: environmental violation under review. The true masterpiece, though, came courtesy of nature itself. That night, heavy rain rolled in, torrential, unstoppable. I sat on my porch, listening to thunder crack across the sky, knowing exactly what would happen next. Her overfilled pool and clogged drains would turn her yard into a small lagoon. I didn't need to lift a finger. When the lightning briefly illuminated the hill, I saw the water cascading over her stone border, rushing down the slope like a mini waterfall. It merged with the lake again, her own pollution coming full circle. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. Just poetic symmetry. The next morning, the entire neighborhood was talking. Karen's backyard was on every phone screen within a mile radius. Her patio furniture had floated halfway to the street, and her pool water was tinted green from the runoff. The county inspector arrived again, and this time he brought company, a truck labeled Environmental Response Unit. They cordoned off her yard, documenting everything. She stood there, drenched and furious, as cameras clicked. I watched from my dock, quiet, arms crossed. When she finally noticed me, she yelled across the water, voice hoarse from shouting, "Are you happy now?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "I'm satisfied." That evening, the HOA called an emergency vote to remove Karen from her committees pending the investigation. Dale called to inform me personally, sounding both relieved and exhausted. "She's suspended indefinitely," he said. "The board finally agreed she's been a liability." "That must have been a tough decision," I said dryly. "Yeah," he sighed, "but honestly, you did us a favor." I smiled at that. "No problem," I said. "I'm just a concerned environmentalist." Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that she'd try something one last time. Karen wasn't the kind of person who accepted defeat gracefully. And sure enough, as dusk fell, I saw her porch light flicker on, and her shadow move against the blinds. She was watching me again. I leaned back on my chair, meeting her stare through the distance. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she stepped outside, phone in hand, her expression unreadable. I almost admired her persistence. But as she raised that phone and began filming me across the lake, I knew she wasn't done. She was building her next move. She'd started with chlorine. I'd replied with gravity. Now she was reaching for something new, legal, digital, public. This wasn't over. But she'd made one critical mistake. She thought she was the only one who could play that game. I had a feeling the next round would leave water far behind. It would be about reputation, and Karen's, unlike her pool, was about to drain faster than ever. When Karen started filming me from across the lake, I knew she was shifting tactics. She wasn't screaming anymore, which was new and dangerous. People like her didn't go quiet unless they were planning something elaborate. For 3 evenings in a row, I caught her pretending to record the sunset, while her phone conveniently pointed toward my dock. Sometimes she'd stroll near the property line in yoga pants and sunglasses, talking loudly about harassment, just in case anyone was listening. It was classic Karen damage control: rebuild the narrative, recast herself as the victim. I let her. Silence unnerves people like her more than confrontation ever could. She wanted a reaction on camera. I gave her stillness. I didn't even look up when she passed by. I kept fixing the fence, painting the dock, doing everything normal people do. And that drove her insane. By the fourth day, the HOA gossip machine was spinning again. I heard snippets from neighbors. Karen telling people I'd rigged illegal pumps, that I'd installed spy cameras, even that I'd threatened her with contamination. It was impressive how quickly she'd twisted the truth into theater. But her biggest mistake wasn't the lying. It was underestimating how tired everyone was of her antics. When she cornered Priya during the morning jog group and tried to recruit sympathy, Priya apparently told her, "You flooded your own yard and picked the wrong guy to mess with." That story traveled faster than any of Karen's lies. Suddenly, the neighborhood tone shifted. People nodded at me again when I passed by. Some even gave small smiles as if to say, "Good for you." Karen, however, was undeterred. When attention began slipping away from her, she found new ways to stir it up. A week later, I came home to find a bright yellow envelope taped to my front door, official letterhead, but badly photocopied. Inside was a notice of pending fine for environmental tampering, signed by acting HOA President Karen M. I couldn't help but laugh. She'd literally appointed herself president overnight. That evening, I attended the next HOA meeting, document in hand. The small community hall was packed, everyone murmuring, half expecting fireworks. Karen sat at the front with a faux authoritative posture, a clipboard in front of her, wearing a navy blazer like she was running a boardroom. Dale sat beside her, looking like he wanted to vanish. "I'd like to start," Karen announced, tapping her pen, "by addressing the ongoing environmental hazard posed by Mr. Williams's illegal water system." I raised a hand lazily. "Before we start, can we clarify something? Did we elect a new president while I was asleep?" Her jaw tightened. "The board voted to appoint me acting president during the ongoing investigation," she said. "Unanimously." "Interesting," I said, glancing at Dale. "Was that before or after the investigation revealed she was the one dumping pool water into a private lake?" Dale rubbed his temples. "Let's stay on topic," he muttered. "We're reviewing alleged property violations." Karen straightened her shoulders, savoring the attention. "This man," she said, pointing at me, "has been manipulating the community's water flow, damaging infrastructure, and harassing me personally." I leaned back, smiling. "That's quite a list. Did you bring any proof, or just the usual performance?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen's face flushed crimson. "I have multiple witnesses," she snapped. "People saw him working at night, rerouting pipes." I nodded. "Yes, when I repaired the damage caused by your illegal drainage system. You can check the timestamps on my security footage." Dale raised a hand to calm things down, but the energy had shifted. One of the quieter residents, an older man named Frank, spoke up from the back. "Karen, we all saw the county trucks at your place. Didn't they post some kind of violation notice?" Karen froze for a split second before forcing a smile. "That was a misunderstanding," she said quickly. "The county cleared me." "Funny," I said, pulling a folded paper from my pocket. "Because I requested a public copy of the report. It says here, homeowner found in violation of environmental discharge regulations, pending remediation. Want me to read it aloud?" The silence that followed was delicious. Karen's lips parted, searching for words that didn't exist. She finally slammed her clipboard shut. "This meeting is adjourned," she barked, storming off as the room erupted in whispers. Dale sighed heavily. "For the record," he said, "no fine will be issued to you, Mr. Williams." I nodded. "Appreciated. Maybe next time we elect a president who doesn't flood the ecosystem." He gave me a look halfway between sympathy and fear. "She's not going to stop," he muttered. "You know that, right?" I smiled faintly. "Oh, I'm counting on it." After that night, things got strangely quiet again. Too quiet. No more notices, no more fake letters. Karen vanished from her usual morning patrols. Her blinds stayed closed, her car didn't move for days. Some neighbors speculated she'd left town to avoid the county fines. But I knew better. She wasn't gone, she was waiting. People like her retreat only to reload. And she reappeared exactly 1 week later, on local news. I was eating dinner when my phone buzzed with a message from Priya. Turn on Channel 5. I did, and nearly dropped my fork. There was Karen, standing lakeside, giving an interview in front of a camera crew. The cheerin' read, "Local HOA member claims neighbor sabotaged property." She was in full performance mode, tears glistening, voice trembling. "I've been targeted for months," she said. "My home's been flooded, my yard destroyed, and the HOA refuses to protect me. All I did was speak up for community safety." The reporter nodded sympathetically. "Do you believe this was retaliation?" Karen dabbed her eye dramatically. "I just want peace. I just want fairness." My phone exploded with texts seconds later. Neighbors laughing, some furious. One read, "She's insane," another, "You're famous now." I switched off the TV and sat back, processing. That move was reckless even for her. By taking it public, she'd invited scrutiny she couldn't control. The county would double down on her case, and any investigation would expose her lies fast. But she'd also crossed a line. The moment she framed me on air, she gave me permission to respond in kind. Not with rage, but with precision. I spent the next day compiling everything I had: videos, timestamps, the lab reports, HOA emails, even photos of the fake notices she'd made. I organized them into a single folder titled HOA Karen Full Documentation. Then I sent it anonymously to 3 places: the county inspector, the HOA board, and, most satisfying of all, the very news station that aired her interview. It didn't take long. By the next afternoon, Channel 5 aired a follow-up segment titled, "New Evidence Contradicts HOA Members' Claims." They showed the footage of her draining the pool, the official county report, and the photos of the contaminated lake. Karen's face, frozen mid-denial, filled the screen as the reporter said, "According to verified environmental records, the discharge originated from her property." It was brutal, precise, and public. I didn't smile while watching it. I just exhaled. The storm had come full circle. That evening, Karen's house went dark. No porch light, no movement, nothing. The neighborhood, on the other hand, buzzed like a festival. People talked in driveways, laughed softly, and for the first time in months, the air felt light. Priya stopped by again, this time with a grin. "You did it," she said. "She's finished." I shook my head. "She'll never think she's finished," I said. "She'll just call it unfair." Still, when I looked out over the lake that night, the reflection was clear again. No foam, no chemical hue, just calm ripples under the moon. Balance restored, for now. 2 days later, a moving truck appeared at Karen's driveway. I stood at my dock watching as men hauled out her furniture. She was there too, wearing dark glasses and avoiding everyone's eyes. For a brief moment, she looked directly at me. Not angry, just hollow, defeated in a way that didn't bring me joy. She got in her SUV and drove off without a word. Dale called later to confirm what I already knew. She'd resigned from the HOA and sold her house to cover the fines. The neighborhood, he said, was already feeling more peaceful. I told him peace was underrated. But what no one knew was that before she left, she'd done one final thing. That night, I walked the property line one last time, just to make sure no damage remained. That's when I saw it, a small white PVC pipe, freshly buried but visible where the soil hadn't settled yet, leading from her old yard directly toward my lake. I crouched, heart sinking, and traced it. It connected to the old drainage channel, the same one she'd used before. Only now, it had a hidden valve. Karen's final act wasn't just petty, it was deliberate. Even as she left, she tried to keep her mess tied to me. It was the perfect Karen signature, one last passive-aggressive gift disguised as negligence. I smiled in disbelief. "You just couldn't let go, could you?" I muttered. This time, though, I didn't react with anger or plans. I simply sealed the pipe with concrete, capped the top, and set a marker stone over it. No drama, no words. She was gone, but her ghost, the entitled kind that lived in rules and pettiness, would linger. As the concrete hardened under the moonlight, I realized something. Some wars don't end with victory or defeat. They end when you stop letting the other side live rent-free in your peace. Still, as I walked back to my house, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't entirely done. People like her rarely vanish quietly. They reinvent themselves. I had no idea just how far her next reinvention would reach. For 2 months after Karen's departure, the neighborhood felt like an entirely different place. The constant hum of drama disappeared, replaced by the gentle normalcy I hadn't realized I'd missed. Children played near the lake again, the ducks returned to nesting by the reeds, and for the first time in years, the HOA newsletters didn't contain passive-aggressive reminders about lawn length or fence paint colors. Even Dale seemed relaxed. He started walking his dog past my house in the evenings, always waving with a sheepish smile, like a man who had escaped a dictatorship. I went about my days quietly, fixing the dock, cleaning the gutters, repainting the porch railings that the lake air had worn down. Life had settled back into balance, and I almost believed the storm was truly over. Almost. Then one morning, I noticed a new sign being staked into the ground across the road, right in front of Karen's old property. Open House, Saturday, hosted by Silver Lakes Realty. I didn't think much of it until I saw the name on the listing agent's signboard. K. Morrison, a licensed realtor. My stomach dropped slightly. Karen Morrison. It couldn't be coincidence. I stood there for a long minute, coffee cup frozen halfway to my lips, staring at that name like it was a bad joke. Sure enough, by the weekend she was back. Not as a resident, but as a businesswoman. She'd reinvented herself as a real estate agent, selling houses in the very same neighborhood that had run her out. When Saturday arrived, I watched from the dock as Karen strutted up the driveway in heels and oversized sunglasses, clutching a clipboard and her phone. She had her smile back, that glossy, weaponized version she used to charm the unsuspecting. The open house drew a small crowd, young couples, retirees, even a few familiar faces from the HOA. She gave her trademark enthusiastic tour, gesturing grandly toward the lake. Private waterfront access, I overheard her say. Beautiful view, low maintenance. The HOA keeps it pristine. I nearly choked on my drink. I wanted to march up there and correct every lie, but instead, I just recorded her from a distance. Old habits die hard. Later that evening, Priya came by, shaking her head. You saw it too? She asked. She's selling houses now. Unbelievable. I nodded slowly. Like a parasite returning to the host, I said. She can't resist this place. Maybe she's just trying to move on, Priya suggested, though even she didn't sound convinced. Move on, I said. She's using the same lake she poisoned as a selling point. Priya sighed. Promise me you won't start another war. No war, I said, smiling faintly. Just observation. But deep down, I knew observation wouldn't be enough. Over the next few weeks, Karen's face started appearing everywhere. Yard signs, billboards by the highway, sponsored Facebook posts boasting local expertise and community dedication. It was almost impressive how quickly she'd pivoted from pariah to professional. The only problem was that she was still telling lies to make sales. When one new family moved in down the street, I overheard the husband thanking her for personally ensuring lake access rights. I nearly laughed out loud. She was selling what she didn't own again. And just like before, her confidence was so complete that no one questioned her. I could have ignored it. I should have ignored it. But one evening, as I walked along the dock, I noticed something that made my blood boil. Karen had installed a brand new Silver Lakes Realty waterfront property showcase banner along the path, on my fence. My property. She'd hung it there without permission, nails driven right into my wood railings. That wasn't marketing. That was territory marking. I took a picture, then calmly removed it, rolled it up, and left it on her car windshield with a note that simply read, "Private property." Again. The next day, I found the same banner rehung, this time closer to the water, attached to the post by her old drainage area. That was when I understood her real motive. She wasn't just selling homes. She was using my lake as a prop for her listings, filming videos of herself standing by the shore, calling it the jewel of the community. She didn't even live here anymore, but somehow, she'd found a way to keep profiting off it. The audacity was stunning. So, I decided to pay a visit. When I pulled up to the open house the following weekend, Karen was mid-speech, charming a couple in matching golf shirts. Her face went pale when she saw me, but she recovered quickly, smiling tight and fake. "Oh, look who's here," she said through gritted teeth. "Still living the lakeside dream, I see." "Trying to," I replied evenly. "Though it's harder when people keep trespassing." Her clients looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry," Karen said sweetly. "We're just admiring the beautiful view. Community property, of course." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You know that's a lie, Karen. This lake's privately deeded, and I have the paperwork to prove it." She tilted her head, all innocence. "Well, you can't gate nature, darling. Buyers love the view." I smiled faintly. "Then maybe you'll love what happens next." That night, I uploaded a series of videos, clear, factual, no commentary, showing her banners on my property, the drainage pipe she'd buried, and clips of her claiming the lake was community managed. I didn't tag her name. I didn't need to. The local Facebook group did it for me within hours. The comments section exploded. Former clients chimed in about hidden fees and confusing paperwork. Someone even posted the old news clip of her environmental violation. By morning, Karen the realtor had gone viral in all the wrong ways. When I saw her the next day, she was furious. She marched right up to my fence, sunglasses off, eyes blazing. "You think you're clever?" she hissed. "You think humiliating me online makes you right?" "No," I said calmly. "The truth makes me right. The internet just helps distribute it." "You ruined my career," she shouted. "You can't prove anything." "Karen," I said softly, "everything I posted was proof." She froze, realizing the trap she'd walked into. "You're going to regret this," she said finally, voice low, trembling with rage. "You always go too far." "Funny," I replied. "That's what you said right before you dumped your pool into my lake." For a moment, we just stared at each other, the air between us thick with old resentment. Then she turned abruptly and stormed away. I figured that would be the end of it, that she'd finally retreat, maybe reinvent herself again somewhere else. But Karen wasn't done. The following week, I got a letter in the mail. This time real, printed, with her company logo. "Cease and desist," it read, accusing me of defamation and interference with business. It demanded I remove all videos and issue a public apology. I laughed so hard I almost spilled my coffee. She'd tried to weaponize the law before. Now she was trying to do it under a business name. I didn't bother replying directly. Instead, I forwarded the letter to the county's licensing department, attaching the documentation of her previous violation. 2 days later, an investigator reached out. "We've received multiple complaints about this agent," he said. "We're looking into her license." By the end of the week, her listings vanished from the Silver Lake's website. Her for sale signs came down. Word spread quickly. Karen had been suspended pending review. When Priya dropped by that evening, she brought cupcakes and a grin. "You're like the suburban Grim Reaper," she said. "Every time she tries to rise, you gently tap her back down." I chuckled. "I don't start the fights. I just finish them." And yet, I didn't feel victorious this time. Watching her crumble again didn't bring the satisfaction it once had. There was something different in the air, a strange heaviness, like this feud had stretched past its natural limit. I realized Karen and I had become two sides of the same coin, locked in a cycle of provocation and retaliation. She thrived on attention. I'd given it to her, even if indirectly. Maybe that's why she kept returning, because I never truly let her go. Still, peace returned slowly. The banner holes in my fence faded beneath fresh paint, the lake shimmered under the late summer sun, and for a while, there were no signs of her anywhere. Her house listing quietly disappeared, replaced by a new agent's name. I thought that was the end of the saga. Until one morning, I got an envelope from the post office, forwarded from my old P.O. box. Inside was a single photograph, my lake taken from across the shore. On the back, in looping cursive, it said, "You can't stop the current." No return address, no signature, but I didn't need one. I stood there, looking at that photo, half annoyed, half amused. Somewhere out there, Karen was still moving, still scheming, still believing she could bend the flow of things. But she was wrong. Because what she never understood was that water doesn't need to be controlled. It remembers. Every ripple, every action leaves a trace. And whether it takes a day, a month, or a lifetime, it always finds its way back home. I stared at that photograph for a long time, the words on the back looping through my head like a haunting echo. You can't stop the current. It wasn't a threat in the obvious sense. It was something colder, something that said she still believed she had control, that her story wasn't finished. I tucked the photo into a drawer and told myself to move on. But over the next few days, small things began happening around the lake, things too precise to be coincidence. The first was the water level. It started dropping slightly, not from natural evaporation but as if something was drawing it away. Then I noticed one of my monitoring sensors. The ones I used to check flow rates had been unplugged. And a week later, someone dumped a bag of lawn debris into the lake, the kind of thing Karen used to do when she was feeling petty. At first, I suspected coincidence, but then one night, I caught a reflection by the old drainage area, a glint of headlights where there shouldn't have been any. It was almost midnight when I stepped out quietly, flashlight in hand, keeping my distance. A dark sedan idled near the old property line, its lights dimmed. I crouched behind a tree, watching. The driver's door opened, and even from across the water, I recognized the silhouette instantly. Karen. She wore a hoodie and moved cautiously, crouching by the shore, dragging what looked like a small pump hose into the mud. My first instinct was disbelief. She'd lost her house, her job, her reputation, and yet here she was, back, sneaking around in the dark like a ghost refusing to fade. I wanted to shout, to call the police, but something stopped me. Instead, I filmed silently, zooming in as she adjusted the hose and turned on a portable pump. The soft whine of machinery carried across the still air. It wasn't pulling water out, it was pumping something in. When she left, I waited until the sound faded, then crossed the yard to inspect. The smell hit first, a faint, chemical tang that clawed at my nose. I knelt and touched the damp soil. It wasn't just water. It was pool cleaner, maybe fertilizer runoff. My anger rose like a tide, hot and heavy, but beneath it was something else, pity. She wasn't waging a war anymore. She was unraveling. This wasn't revenge. It was obsession, the final gasp of someone who couldn't stand being irrelevant. Still, I couldn't ignore it. The next morning, I called the county inspector again, sent him the footage, and within hours, a patrol car and an environmental agent were at the site. They collected samples, measured contamination, and took my statement. The agent, a calm woman with sharp eyes, said, "You did the right thing. Whoever's responsible will face serious charges this time." I nodded, but part of me felt hollow. Watching Karen self-destruct had stopped being satisfying. It was just sad. By evening, the entire neighborhood knew. Dale called, sounding both horrified and vindicated. "We got reports that someone saw her car last night," he said. "She's been living 2 towns over, apparently renting a place under her maiden name. I guess she couldn't stay away." "She never could," I said quietly. "She always had to win, even when there was nothing left to win." He sighed. "The county's pressing charges for environmental contamination. It's not just fines this time. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want to. When I hung up, I walked down to the dock, looking out over the lake. The water was calm again, rippling under the orange glow of sunset. It was beautiful, serene, untouched by the chaos of human ego. For the first time in months, I felt something like closure, thin, fragile, but real. A week later, a letter arrived from the county. It wasn't about me this time. It was an update. Karen had been arrested and released on bail pending trial. They'd found illegal chemicals stored in her car and evidence connecting her to multiple contamination incidents around the neighborhood. It was surreal reading it in black and white, the final punctuation to a feud that had spun out of control. I folded the letter, placed it beside the old photo she'd sent, and thought about how strange it was that something as simple as water could carry so much destruction and symbolism. It had started with a single act, her dumping pool water into my lake, and it had spiraled into a chain reaction of pride, retaliation, and ruin. The next morning, I got a call from Priya. Her voice was low, hesitant. "Did you hear?" she asked. "Karen's in the hospital." "Hospital?" I repeated. "Why?" "They said she tried to drive her car into the county pond off Highway 9, Priya whispered. "She survived, but she's in bad shape." The news said she was under investigation and panicked. For a moment, I said nothing. I walked out to the dock, staring at the water that had once reflected her backyard lights. "That pond isn't even deep," I said quietly. "She must have known." Priya didn't answer for a while. Then she said, "You know, it's weird. After everything she did, I still feel bad for her." "So do I admitted. She built her whole identity around control. When she lost it, there was nothing left. After that, no one saw Karen again. She didn't return to the neighborhood, and the court proceedings were postponed indefinitely. Word spread that she'd sold what little she had and moved in with family somewhere far away. Dale told me the HOA officially revoked her membership, sealing the last trace of her reign. But even in absence, her presence lingered. People still referred to things in Karen terms, like, "Don't pull a Karen," when someone complained too loudly, or, "That's a Karen move," when someone tried to bend rules. She'd become a cautionary tale, a suburban legend told in whispers at block parties. And though I didn't like to admit it, part of me missed her presence. Not her chaos, but the energy she brought, the way she made life unpredictable, absurd, alive. It's strange how even the worst people can leave behind a peculiar kind of emptiness when they're gone. One afternoon, months later, as autumn painted the trees in shades of gold, I received a small parcel with no return address. Inside was a flash drive and a note that simply said, "For closure." Against my better judgment, I plugged it into my laptop. There were 3 video files. The first was grainy footage of Karen standing by her old pool, smiling faintly, saying, "It wasn't supposed to go this far." The second was her sitting in her car, staring at the camera. "You were right," she said softly. "I just couldn't stand being wrong. About the lake, about the neighborhood, about everything. I thought control made me safe. But it made me small." The third video was just silence. Her pointing the camera toward the lake, the same one that started it all. For 2 full minutes, the water shimmered in sunlight, perfectly still. Then the video ended. I sat there for a long time afterward, unsure what to feel. Anger, forgiveness, maybe both. I copied the videos to a folder labeled Karen at the end and deleted them from the drive. Then I walked outside. The lake was calm, reflecting the fiery trees like liquid glass. I could hear the faint sound of ducks splashing near the reeds, and somewhere across the water, a child laughed. Life had gone on, the way it always does, washing over everything that came before. For the first time, I didn't see the lake as a battlefield or a symbol of revenge. It was just water, patient, neutral, eternal. That night, as the sun disappeared behind the trees, I took Karen's old photo and her handwritten note, folded them neatly, and placed them in a small tin box. I walked to the edge of the dock and tossed it into the water. It sank slowly, leaving ripples that spread outward until they vanished into the dark. I whispered quietly, "Rest, Karen," not because she deserved forgiveness, but because I needed peace. Then I sat there, listening to the gentle lapping of the water against the wood, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: stillness. Weeks later, a letter arrived from the county one last time. It was brief, almost procedural: case closed. Site restored. No further contamination detected. I smiled faintly as I folded it. The current had finally stopped moving in circles. It had found its direction again. The neighborhood thrived that autumn. The lake reflected a perfect mirror of orange and gold leaves, and families began holding picnics near the shore again. Dale retired from the HOA and moved to Arizona, leaving Priya as the new chair, someone who actually believed in community over control. She laughed when she told me. "No more Karens," she promised. "If one shows up, I'll just hand them a rake and make them work for once." As winter settled in, I noticed something strange. Where the drainage pipe used to be, reeds had grown thick and tall, their golden stalks swaying gently with the breeze. Nature had reclaimed what we'd fought over. The scars of our feud were gone, swallowed by time and root. Standing there, I realized how small our battles had been in the face of something so constant. Water didn't care about pride or rules or property lines. It just flowed, found its balance, and endured. One night, as snow began to fall over the lake, I caught a reflection in the frozen surface. Just a trick of light, but for a second, it looked like a figure standing by the opposite shore. I smiled faintly and whispered, "Goodbye, Karen." The wind carried the words away, scattering them across the stillness. And as the first flakes settled on the water, I understood that this story, our story, had always been about more than fences and fines. It was about learning when to fight and when to let go, about realizing that revenge doesn't fix the damage. It only mirrors it. I went inside, made a cup of coffee, and stood by the window, watching the snow fall thicker until it covered everything: the dock, the reeds, the past. The lake shimmered beneath it, silent and whole, as if it had finally forgiven us both. And for the first time since that morning when chlorine first burned the air, I felt the kind of peace that doesn't come from winning. It comes from release.